Okay, so this subject is so fascinating that I have to actually do something that is I do. I'm a witch, and this is an info dump. So this is actually going to be a witchfodump. So coining the new phrase, wordsmithing is part of ADHD. So here we go. I'm going to talk to you about this. I'm fascinated by this because my question is the ghost attached to the girls? Or is the ghost attached to the Ouija board? Now, one way to suss that out would be to do a controlled experiment where the people that are like, get some people that have no knowledge of either the girls or the previous occurrences with the Ouija board, and have them try to contact and see who comes through. If the ghost is attached to that Ouija board, then likely that ghost would come through, but you cannot have the slightest communication between these people and the other people. They can't even be in the same room because people will literally just tell on themselves. They don't even understand how they give information out all the time. Like, people are just like that, right? So the other thing is, if they are attached to the girls, then the ghost is going to be wherever the girls are, right? Now, if there's a third theory, right? Actually, it's 3, 4. Well, the third theory is that the girls have created this consciousness, this entity, from the energy that they expended putting into using this Ouija board and speaking to it, right? How much energy does that take? I'm not sure. I don't think it takes a lot. Now, this kind of ties to another thing that happened, which is based on a true story. Now, there was a movie in the 2014s that came out, and it was called The Quiet Ones. And it's based on a true story of a man called Dr. A.R.G. Owen in 1972. He created a series of experiments called the Philip experiments. So he gathered a group of people, and they did what was called table tipping. Okay, so they would place their hands on a table, and everyone, it was all free and clear. There's no tablecloth. There's no like hidden whatever, right? But they would put their hands together like people put their hands together on a planchette for the Ouija board, and they would have the table tip everywhere, right? Or there would be knocks, or the table would tip right over. Sometimes the table would levitate, and there's film of this. Because they filmed this experiment. So they videotaped all these things, and the ghost who was supposed to be doing this was named Philip. Now, here's the rub. Philip never existed. There was no Philip. There was never anyone called Philip. Yet, these experiments produced all this phenomena, which was very mysterious. I don't know if there was another experiment afterwards. I don't know what happened. I don't know the rest of the history with that. But this is you can find the video of this on YouTube. It was on YouTube at one time. So anyways, that happened in 1972. Parker Brothers produces Ouija boards. If you're wondering how kids can get their hands on them, it's in the toy section. I think it still is in the toy section. It's a Parker Brothers toy. So maybe I'm going to have to do a deep dive on the history of the Parker Brothers someday. But anyways, the people, now this movement, this spiritualist movement, this is what it was based on, right? There was a spiritualist movement that began in 1848 with the sisters. Sorry, I gotta read this stuff because I can't remember. The sisters were called Margaret and Kate Fox, and they lived in Haydensville, New York. And in 1848, they were teenagers, by the way. They began hearing a series of loud knocks. Now, there is a theory floating out there that teenagers are full of telekinetic energy because of their repressed emotions. And I was a teenager. I had tons of repressed emotions. Some of them were repressed. Not all were kept repressed. But this makes sense in a way, because that energy's got to go somewhere, right? So they believe that these telekinetic things could be occurring because of the repressed emotions and energies or the change in brains. I don't know. Let's blame teenagers for something, right? Like, because it's always got to be their fault. Those darn kids. Anyways, we were all teenagers, so we can all just shut up about that, right? So this began in 1848. In 1848, it kind of lost momentum in 1880, but it was extremely divisive, this movement, and it's still around today. Spiritualist churches are still around in Canada, the UK, and United States. So this movement never completely stopped. Now, there were so many fraudulent mediums that they actually had to do an act called the Fraudulent Mediums Act in 1951. They had to do this act to prevent mediums from committing fraud and defrauding people because they would just take money. Now, there was some really famous people supporting this movement. Now, the father of this movement, his name was called Emanuel Swedenborg, but some of the proprietors of this movement are quite famous names. So one of them is called Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. Please, sir, can I have some more? Oliver Twist, author, right? He also has pictures of him with fairies that you can find on the internet as well. Queen Victoria was very interested in contacting her deceased husband, Prince Albert. She was absolutely gutted by his death. The person who, Mrs. Winchester, the Winchester house, she contacted mediums, and that's how she created her house, was through something called, I believe, psychography. There's psychography and there's pneumatography, which was where they would write messages, right? They'd be in a trance, or they'd be under the influence of a spirit channeling, and they would write, or it would sometimes they call it automatic writing, right? And knocking was quite frequent. So I'd be interested in hearing whether or not your friends experienced knocking during their times using, or if they still experience knocking, because I know a lot of people do attribute strange knocks, especially 3 knocks in a row, to spiritual activities, right? Prime Minister Mackenzie King was also really big into the spiritualist movement. So here we are, we have like 4 really famous people that were highly influential, especially during that time, really into the spiritualist movement. I don't know if your friends, like if they created this spirit, almost like a tulpa kind of thing, where their energy and their effort and their focus on this being existing created, right? Like almost manifested him being into being, right? Because that could also be it. They literally could have created the ghost that's haunting them, right? So I would be interested if they did any type of, sorry, I got a hair in my mouth. I would be really interested if they did any type of research in the area and see if there was anybody that had that name that passed at that time. Sometimes there are records, like old churches, they have records. Like there were some people that really were into keeping records, old record keeping, but it's not always easy to access. Like you have to get into a church or a city hall or something and, you know, go onto the microfiche. And if you don't know what that is, you should watch Stranger Things, because they used a microfiche on that one, eh? Like the 80s wasn't that long ago. Come on. It's not like it's the 1880s. It was the 1980s that we're talking about. So anyways, that is the info dump so far on this topic. The Philip experiment is really fascinating, so I think you should check that out. And I'm really interested to know, let me know if there was any knocking, and if anybody else has anything to add to this, please comment, because I want to know. I'm fascinated by the subject. All right. Have a great day. Blessed be, and merry meet and merry part. Take care.